Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host. First up, for the FF Face-Off, Anthony Cervino. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing awesome, Mike. How are you?
I am great because the Bengals are about to get Joe Burrow and go on a quest for 10 Super Bowl championships over the next 15 years. The Cowboys won't win because they lost to the Jets this year. Also, our new co-host, who will be here most days now, help me welcome NFL beat reporter and NBA reporter, a little bit of everything else reporter, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Eli Manning has retired. I don't think that was any shock to anybody. And now you have the talking heads talking about whether Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer or not. So, Anthony, what do you think?
You know, I'm kind of on the cusp here because Eli Manning, he has the Super Bowls. He was clutch. You can't tell the story of the NFL without mentioning Eli Manning because, you know, he played a big role. He was the quarterback of the team that beat the undefeated Patriots and handed Tom Brady and the Patriots their first Super Bowl loss. On the other hand, Eli Manning is 117 and 117 as a starter. He was never considered a top 5 quarterback during his era. He hasn't won a playoff game in the final 8 seasons of his career. So I'm very much in the middle here. I think he will get in because of those Super Bowls and because his last name is Manning and because he is very media friendly. But I don't know if it's right that he gets in.
All right. Sam, what do you think?
No, I'd say he probably gets in, but it's going to be a long wait. I don't think it's one of the situations where he just walks into the Hall of Fame. Because I understand what Anthony's saying, but I feel like you've got the Super Bowls, and he was clutching those Super Bowls too. It wasn't like he played poorly. Like you look at someone like Ben Roethlisberger. He didn't necessarily play extremely well in the Super Bowls that he won, but Eli was the MVP for the Giants in the Super Bowls. He made those great throws. He has clutch moments where he hit Mario Manningham and David Tyree and Plexico Burr. So he has those moments. And I do think if we're playing devil's advocate for the other side saying he doesn't get in, he had some really bad seasons. He led the league in interceptions 3 times. And he never was one of those truly like top of the shelf elite quarterbacks during his time in the NFL. But I think if you look at the full body of work and how it compares to other quarterbacks, I think he's deserving of it.
I think this. I think it's according to what the criteria is. Once again, he's not one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever lived. But Dan Fouts and Jim Kelly are both in the Hall of Fame, and neither one of them should be. I think you go by that, he's a definite Hall of Famer. And I think when you go to the old saying, can you write the history of the NFL without him? You can't write the history of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, and Tom Brady without him, which I think is what Anthony was saying there. The throw he made to Mario Manningham down the left side, coming out on that final drive, is one of the greatest pressure throws I've ever seen. And I don't care about the last 8 years because I think that was more of an organizational issue with the New York Giants than it was Eli Manning. And you can go a little farther. If Plaxico Burress is not a moron and shoots himself in the leg the year after they won the Super Bowl, they had what looked to be the best team in the NFL. They were going to win back-to-back world championships probably, Anthony.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I do forget that follow-up year. And they were a pretty loaded team. The defense was still intact, and they were missing Plaxico.
Yeah, because Plaxico shot himself. Because Plaxico's a moron, like most wide receivers, it seems. The other thing, Sam, that gets me is this. When you look at Eli Manning, when the 12-team playoffs started in 1990, when Eli Manning beat the number 1 seed Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, he was the first wild card team to go win on the road against the number one seed. Now, I know it means less because it's the Cowboys and they always choke in that situation, but still, that was a huge achievement. And then in the NFC Championship game, he goes and beats Brett Favre. A couple years later in the NFC Divisional Playoff, he beats Aaron Rodgers. He beats the 49ers in San Francisco. So I think if you go by the criteria that is used today to get guys into the Hall of Fame, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you look at the 2007-2011 seasons when they made those runs to the Super Bowl. In 2011, in the 4 games in the playoffs, he threw for 1,219 yards, 9 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. So he came through for them in the postseason. And really, I mean, for a quarterback, that's kind of what matters most is how you play when you get to the big moment. And if we're looking at guys like Joe Namath, if we're looking at guys like Joe Namath who are in the Hall of Fame and Dan Fouts is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but see, there's a difference here. Joe Namath shouldn't be. Joe Namath never should have been the MVP of Super Bowl III. Joe Namath was very ordinary as a quarterback.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you have him in the Hall of Fame, he threw a lot of interceptions during his time too. I think he led the league 4 times in interceptions. If you have a guy like Namath in, I feel like you cannot justify leaving Eli out.
Well, I think having a guy like Namath in is what makes me sure that Eli is getting in, Anthony, because Namath's in because of Super Bowl III.
Right, and I think the whole Namath call, he won the Super Bowl, but he also had the guarantee. That plays into that historical role, just like Eli does, more so the statistical role in NFL history.
Yeah, and if you look
at Eli, it's not like Eli Manning. His stats aren't terrible.
No, his stats are great. I mean, he's number 8 in passing yards, 10th in touchdowns. So I don't see what people are saying. And if you look, even a couple years ago, he took a Giants
he's
team
10th in game-winning drives, which shows how clutch he is.
Yeah, he's a stud. I mean, Dan Fouts. Is Dan Fouts a Hall of Fame quarterback? Anybody? Does anybody here, can anybody state their case for Dan Fouts to be in the Hall of Fame?
The only thing I can think of is that he played an offense that kind of changed how the offensive approach was taken, and he started throwing the ball more. That's the only thing I can think about, is that he played an offense that kind of changed how they approached the game. But in terms of like winning, there's not the winning.
That's not true. Because that offense was started by Sid Gilman in the 1960s with the Chargers, and then Don Coryell took it to the St. Louis Cardinals in the mid-'70s, and Jim Hart was the quarterback. Jim Hart's not in the Hall of Fame, and Jim Hart was a better quarterback than Dan Fouts. And the Cardinals, with that offense in 75 and 76, actually made the playoffs, which is something the Cardinals didn't do back then. So he wasn't. And the thing is, Dan Fouts had maybe the greatest wide receiving core in NFL history. He had Charlie Joyner. He had John Jefferson. He had Kellen Winslow. He had Chuck Muncie out of the backfield. And in 1979, they're the number 1 seed. They played here, number 1 or 2 seed, I can't remember which, but they played the Houston Oilers without Earl Campbell, Dan Pastorini, or Kenny Burrow, their best wide receiver. They were a 2-touchdown favorite at home against the Houston Oilers team with Rob Carpenter running the ball, and Gifford Nielsen was the starting quarterback. And the Oilers on that day upset the San Diego Chargers, and they did it by intercepting Dan Fouts. I think Vernon Perrier had like 3 picks on the day against him. And then in 1980, Dan Fouts gets a home championship playoff game against the Oakland Raiders, who were a wild card. They lose 34-27. Dan Fouts threw a couple interceptions. In 1981, Dan Fouts, with all that talent on offense, goes to Cincinnati and loses 27-7. Throws a couple interceptions. And people always want to bring up, well, that was just because it was so cold out. But in November of that year, the Bengals beat them worse in San Diego, 40-17. And you know what? The turning point at that game was Dan Fouts on a 1st and goal from the 5, throwing an interception that Lewis Breeden took back 102 yards for a touchdown. 1982, the Dolphins had David Woodley as the starting quarterback against Dan Fouts and the Chargers. Dan Fouts throws 3 interceptions. They lose. They never get back to the playoffs again. There is no defining moment in Dan Fouts' career, or Jim Kelly's for that matter, where you can say, this is something they did that was special. With Eli Manning, there's multiple occurrences of that. So I think just because of that, he should be in the Hall of Fame. And the thing is, Dan Fouts went in 1993. So that makes him either a first or second ballot Hall of Famer. And Dan Fouts' career, 254 touchdowns, 242 interceptions, and a losing record as a starting quarterback. I know this because I always defend Kenny Anderson getting in the Hall of Fame with the Dan Fouts argument. Because Dan Fouts, let's face it, also had one other huge advantage. He was on national television. He was doing games on Monday Night Football. And it seems like if you were a player that was on Monday Night Football or in a studio on the weekend, you got a better chance to get in the Hall of Fame, Anthony.
Oh, absolutely. It's like It's like what we talked about Bill Cowher last week.
Yeah, which is why Bill Cowher's there. And people bring up the Jim Plunkett argument, but Jim Plunkett was the MVP of one Super Bowl. The thing that gets me, Sam, is this. There's only been like 4 other quarterbacks that have been the MVP of multiple Super Bowls. Eli Manning is one of those. And the other guys are named Brady, Montana, and Elway. So when you look at that separates it too. It's not like it was just one great moment in Super Bowl 42. And people say, the throw, he pulled it out of his ass, just launched it, closed his eyes, and completed it. That may be true. But then he throws a 13-yard touchdown pass to Plaxico Burress, which is a great read because the Patriots came out in a zero blitz. He found the receiver and hits him open to win the game. So I think that most people that don't believe Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer are basically just morons.
I think people like to write him off, but they don't realize that if you combine the regular season record with the playoff record, he's 10th all-time in wins. So he's definitely up there with a lot of great quarterbacks. People just love to write him off. He's one of the guys people love to hate. But if you sit down and objectively look at it, I don't think you can keep him out of the Hall of Fame.
Well, and if you go with 2000 and if you go to 2008, I do think he was one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, who would you take Ben Roethlisberger over him if you had to go win a big game?
Well, listen, that's a bit. I'm going to say yes because I'm a Steelers fan. I'm just being.
Why? Because when Big Ben played well against Arizona, but against Seattle, it may have been the worst a quarterback's ever played and won a Super Bowl.
I think it's the tail. You're saying in the first half of their career.
I'm saying through their whole career this.
Ben Roethlisberger does have more game-winning drives than Eli Manning, not by a lot.
Him. He also has a lot better cast around him. Ben Roethlisberger also failed with maybe the best running back wide receiver combination in the NFL for the last part of his career. And he had a hell of an offensive line and still came up short.
Yeah, that defense was terrible, though, for the years before the season.
That defense, when he won the 2 Super Bowls, was nowhere near terrible, and you know that.
No, I meant the defense last couple of years. When they had Brown and they had Bell, the defense was terrible.
Yeah, but he had a great offensive line, and the thing is this, the Pittsburgh Steelers, when they would go to New England, would only score 14 points. That's more than just a defensive issue. And Ben would toss a couple to the Patriots. And I know it's harder to do with no defense, but you use that, I will use this. For about 6 years, Eli went with nothing.
And, I won't contest that. Eli didn't have a lot for a period in his career. He didn't have a lot offensively either. He had sometimes he was just out there by himself, really, trying to make plays for the Giants.
Yeah, that was the majority of the last 8 years. The front office at Pittsburgh did a good job of putting players to help Ben be successful. But when I watch Eli in a big situation, I would rather have Eli than most guys over the line. I would rather have Eli Manning as my quarterback at a Super Bowl than Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
I never saw Eli poop his pants in a Super Bowl. I saw Peyton Manning do it all the time. Peyton Manning, if you remember, lost the Super Bowl because he threw the ball to the Saints. The Super Bowl he won, he threw 2 picks. It's just because they were playing Rex Grossman. And the Denver Carolina Super Bowl, I think he threw for 150 yards. That was a Von Miller thing. And then you had the debacle against the Seattle Seahawks where he craps his pants and gets beat like, what was it, 168-2? Seemed like it.
Yeah, it felt like that. That game was over like at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, and I will make this case. I would bet you almost anything. You put Eli Manning in Indianapolis from 1998 on, they'd have won more than one Super Bowl. I just think this. I think you also have to realize Eli Manning came into a situation in New York where Kurt Warner was the starting quarterback, brought there to make it easier for the transition for him to come in. You had the holding out of the draft and refusing to go to San Diego or whatever it was. And there's a lot of pressure on him there. I think this. I think if you'd have put Peyton Manning in New York at the same time Eli was there under the same circumstances, I think Peyton Manning would be considered a bust today.
Because, Eli Manning, I like that you bring up the New York narrative, because Eli really, his personality, his demeanor, the way he can handle the media, and the way New York is, I think he was the perfect quarterback to be there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think if you put a lot of these other guys there, I think they would have shrunk in the moment. I think that his brother would have shrunk in the moment. So, all right, let's transition this to Antonio Brown, who looks like he's going to spend a lot of time in jail at some point. So his career is probably over. So we'll start off with Sam here. Sam, should Antonio Brown be in the Hall of Fame if he never plays another game?
No, I don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame at this point, because I think we would argue he definitely had a Hall of Fame talent, and maybe even if his career ended and he didn't have his off-the-field stuff, I think you could still say he's definitely a Hall of Famer. But if you take into account everything that's happened, all the issues, everything he's said and done, I just don't see how you could put that in the Hall of Fame. It's totally different than like a Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. Because Randy Moss and Terrell Owens had their own issues, but this is a legal situation. Antonio Brown has been accused of things that Terrell Owens and Randy Moss didn't have to face. And this is such a combustion of a promising Hall of Fame case and a promising player that I just don't see how you could ever put Antonio Brown in the Hall of Fame and justify it at this point.
Well, how about this? Do you think that O.J. Simpson should be removed?
Removal is difficult. Removal is different. But I don't
if you're going to keep somebody out for something they did off the field, I mean, what did he do on the field that was wrong?
What do you mean?
You're supposed to judge them by what's on the field and what happens there, unless they're gambling or doing something to affect the integrity of the game. Now, I don't think he should be in there, and I think the difference between him, Randy Moss, and Terrell Owens is this. Randy Moss and Terrell Owens also did this for about 5 or 6 more years at least than what he did.
Yeah, they had the longer careers, and they have the numbers put basically in the top 5 in every category. Brown doesn't have that. But also, like I said, it's a legal issue, too. Like, Randy Moss and Terrell Owens had their problems, but Antonio Brown has got an arrest warrant out for him, and he locked himself apparently in his house the other day. So this is a different level, in my opinion.
I lock myself in my house all the time. Don't you lock the doors when you're in the house?
Well, yeah, I'm locked in there, but I didn't have a whole bunch of cops outside trying to get in, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, but if you had cops trying to get in, wouldn't you lock your doors?
I might, I don't know how to respond to that situation. I might panic a little bit, to be fair. But
okay, now let's go to a man who would come out shooting. Anthony, what do you think?
This is Antonio Brown. This whole situation is as confusing as what he's been doing in the past year or so off the field. Whether or not he deserves to be in a Hall of Fame. You bring up O.J. Simpson. Should we remove him? Should we question Ray Lewis because he was accused?
Well, you can't question him because he was accused. Hell, he was found not guilty.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, that is kind of why.
I think you got to put Antonio Brown in.
Why?
But just like I said about Eli, because he was so media friendly and likable, that gives him an edge. Well, Antonio Brown certainly has the numbers because he was dominant for, consistently for years. But for this when you take recency bias into consideration, it's hard to vote him in.
Well, I
think he should get in for his contributions on the field. But if you take into consideration the integrity of the Shield, he probably will get slighted.
Well, if you go integrity of the Shield, then, Roger Goodell could never get in, and neither could Jerry Jones. When I look at this, though, my question is, he played 10 playoff games. He averaged 80 yards of reception in those 10 playoff games. He scored 4 touchdowns in those 10 playoff games. Shouldn't you have to do something in the playoffs to get to the Hall of Fame? I mean, as a wide receiver, he had 800 receptions. I mean, I'd rather have Cliff Branch's 500 or 600 because Cliff Branch played in a day where it was a hell of a lot harder to make those catches because the defense was different. I think it's hard. And if you're going to do that, then you definitely think Chad Johnson belongs, right?
Well, no, because Chad Johnson.
I'm asking Anthony. Anthony.
I don't know if Chad had the same type of career that Antonio Brown did, and I'm going to pull that up now because that's a really good question.
Well, that's why I'm the host, buddy. Let's see.
Wow, you know what? Now looking at it, Chad had similar numbers for a similar run.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. And the thing is, Chad was considered at one point probably the best wide receiver in football. But the thing where Chad fell short again, 3 playoff games, 7 receptions, 108 yards. Now,
Chad never had a 100 reception season, where Antonio Brown, looks like he had about 6 or 7 straight.
Yeah, but remember this. A 100-yard reception season was not as prevalent when Chad Johnson played.
Yes.
And also, with Chad Johnson, you're looking at 90, 95, 97, 87, 93. So I think you're really just kind of, cutting hairs there. And
but with Antonio Brown, you're not talking about like 101, 110, 129, 136, 106, 101, 104. So for that, there's that 2-year, 129, 136, and then his yardage total, 1698, 1834. I mean, that's
yeah, but
that's
you also,
dominant.
Once again, if you look who the leading receivers were, you don't see a bunch of guys at 110 and 120 until about the last 10 years. So, I mean, 90, 95, and 97 in 2003 and 4 and 5 is as impressive as 120 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
So, but that's my point. I mean, nobody would even consider Chad Johnson a Hall of Famer, mainly because he put on that stupid jacket acting like he was a Hall of Famer. But now I think this. Chad Johnson, when he went a little stupid, if he doesn't go stupid, he plays another 3 or 4 years and throws up, 3 or 4 more 70, 80 catch seasons, he can make the case for the Hall of Fame. But a lot of guys don't get in, Sam, just because there's no Super Bowl appearance here. And whether it's right or wrong, and I know it's a team game, Antonio Brown was not a dominant playoff player, was he?
He had some games and some moments where he was good. Like the one play where he reached across the goal line as time expired to beat the Baltimore Ravens. That was a moment. He's got like a few, but it's not like dominant. Like you look at a dominant playoff receiver who has like moments galore, like a Jerry Rice.
Yeah,
exactly. Larry Fitzgerald's like the consummate guy we point to currently because he did it against the Green Bay Packers, against the Steelers in the Super Bowl. He was always there. But Antonio Brown doesn't have that kind of resume in the playoffs. I don't think he has that.
No, Antonio Brown in his career, 51 of 81 targets, 837 and 4.
Yeah,
and that's in 10
special.
playoff games.
I mean, it's good, but it's nothing special. And the fact is,
great.
defense or no defense, I mean, no Super Bowls there, was there?
No appearances, I don't think. Maybe in 20...
In 2011,
They made it 2010 season, but he wasn't playing. He wasn't starting.
Yeah, he wasn't playing. He played in 3 games and he caught 5 passes. So it's not like he definitely wasn't dominant there.
Yeah, he got the Carson Wentz ring.
Yeah. Well, not really, because Carson Wentz had a lot to do with that team getting a ring. I don't know why you have such hatred for Carson Wentz still.
I like Carson Wentz. I'm sold on Wentz, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is, and what it is this. Carson Wentz won them like 11 games to get them there. It's not the same thing.
He did have an unbelievable season.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to be the MVP of the NFL probably that year until he got hurt. So, all right, so it's settled. He's not in. All right, Dez Bryant. I know Anthony wants to talk about Dez Bryant because he's a Dallas Cowboy, and the Cowboys lost to the Jets this year. But should Dez Bryant, and we'll ask Sam, since this is Anthony's question, do you think Dez Bryant deserves another shot to play in the NFL?
I mean, look, if you're just going to bring him in for a tryout, that's fine. But I don't know what Dez Bryant will bring you at this point in his career. Because he wasn't an elite receiver in the final 3 years. He wasn't an elite receiver in 2015, 2016, 2017, which the last 3 years that he actually played in the games recorded stats. He did not play in 2018. He did not play in 2019, even though he was around teams. So you're talking about a guy who hasn't played in an NFL game in 2 years, and he's saying he wants to get like the Jason Witten role on the Cowboys. It's a lot more difficult for receivers to play the Jason Witten role, though, because Witten kind of sneak out there. And Witten was a guy who made the Pro Bowl in 2017, skipped 2018, and came back and put basically the same numbers in 2019. But he missed 1 year, and he's a Hall of Fame caliber tight end who plays against linebackers. And the offensive role he played is a lot different than what you'd be asking Dez to do. I don't think Dez could do that for Dallas. I don't think Dez could do it in the NFL.
All right, so was your question, Anthony, whether Dez can do it, or was it rather, should he have the opportunity to do it?
Should he get the opportunity to, whether it's in Dallas or another team, because he hasn't played since 2017. The Saints did bring him in, and then he had the Achilles injury. He's only 31 years old, and I think at this point, Dez knows if he has any more shots, it's one. He knows he can't be a distraction, and I think he'll take any role a team is willing to give him. I don't think the whole Witten role in Dallas, I don't know if that works. But, why not the Saints, who are looking for a number 2 receiver? I mean, they kicked the tires on Antonio Brown this season, knowing that he wouldn't be able to play. They brought in Dez. They brought in Cameron Meredith. They brought in Brandon Marshall. And if all they're looking for is just like that red zone threat, somebody who can go up and get the ball, why not Dez? Why not Dez in Green Bay? Because Aaron Rodgers throws that back shoulder fade like, he did that with Jordy, the way Romo did it with Dez in that same era. So I think there is a place for Dez, at least a tryout.
Yeah, but you got to pay him, too, and you got to pay him more than a young guy.
It depends. What is he willing to play for?
It doesn't matter, because after you've been tenured in the league for more than 4 years, there's a scale where they have to pay you at least this much. And that's why you see the average NFL career is 3.5 years, because it kicks in at like year 4 and 5. And when you get to year 4 and 5, if you are a number 3 receiver and you're making a certain amount of money, they have to pay you a minimum salary of this. So if I could bring in a 3 receiver that's younger and he's going to make a few $100,000 less, that's why you see so many guys who are gone by the time you get to that 4th year. So he's going to cost you a little bit more money, and then you've got the question, he hasn't played in 2 years, is he going to be able to stay healthy? I would say this, if I'm a coach in the NFL, I'd give him a shot to see what he can do, but he also carries a bunch of baggage, Anthony.
No, and it's really up to Dez. If somebody does bring him in, what Dez are we going to get? Are we going to get the Dez that we have been used to seeing who was an issue? Or are we going to get a mature Dez who really just wants to give whatever he has left to the game?
All right, let me put it to you like this, Anthony. Usually when you got a guy like this, Chad Johnson's one you can look at, Antonio Brown, everybody always says, well, they know they don't have any more opportunities. But it seems more often than not, even the guys with no more opportunities still screw it up because, if you spent the first 30 years of your life being selfish, egotistical, and a pain in the ass, usually in the 31st or 32nd year, you don't all of a sudden do a complete 360 or 180.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, I don't know if many teams would do it. I don't think a young coach or a young locker room would be wise to bring him in. But why not? Like I said, I can see the Saints doing it.
New England Patriots.
That's where I was going next.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't the Patriots do that? What do you think, Sam?
I mean, like I said, I think he deserves a shot if teams believe he can play. Because you'll get teams like the Patriots, they have tested guys, and the Saints have done the same thing. They've brought in guys, and they've seen if they can play, and they tested them and stuff like this. I just don't know if he can because you've got the Achilles injury, and you talked about him being a red zone option. Well, you also mentioned Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall was 6'5", and he didn't do anything in his last 2 years in the NFL. And he was 6'5", and Dez Bryant is 6'2". So he's 3 inches shorter. He hasn't played in 2 years. So maybe he looks good against air, but I don't know if he can actually suit up and play an NFL game right now.
No. And if he does, I think it should be for the Cowboys. Just my opinion.
I don't want him in Dallas.
I want him in Dallas. I think it would be good for you guys. Because remember, I want you to lose.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, give him another distraction. It's the perfect idea. Send him to Dallas.
Yeah, Jerry will take him, let him cut his grass, clean the pool, catch a few passes here or there. Him and Jason Witten can clean the pool together. All right, anything else we want to discuss, Sam?
Not really. That's most of the big news, I think.
Anthony?
No, we got it down.
All right, Anthony, you want to tell everybody where they can find you on the FF Face-Off?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. You can follow the show at the FF Face-Off, and we can be found at all the top social media and podcast platforms.
All right, Sam.
Yeah, you can follow me on Sam_Teets33 on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. I'm constantly posting new sports stuff, new articles. So feel free to go check that out.
All right, you can follow me at Grueling Truth on thegruelingtruth.com. Make sure you check out On This Day, which today is January the 23rd, 1983. We talk about the AFC Championship game in the mud in Miami at the Orange Bowl where the Dolphins beat the Jets 14-0. Tomorrow it'll be a little Super Bowl 16 talk between the Bengals and 49ers. Day after that, Super Bowl 15, Raiders-Eagles. You can find us anywhere you find podcasts. So make sure you check us out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube. You name it, we're there. But for now, for Sam Teets, Anthony Cervino, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.